What if the last digit of your birth year could reveal something surprising about you? It was a typical Tuesday morning in New York City, and Sarah had just finished her coffee, feeling the familiar buzz of her hectic life returning. The subway was crowded, the streets noisy, and people were rushing in every direction. But amidst the chaos, Sarah couldn't shake a nagging feeling that something was missing. She had always felt it, a sense of longing for something more, something deeper than the ordinary humdrum of daily life. It wasn't that she was unhappy, it was just that she knew there was a part of herself she hadn't fully explored. She had tried everything to find it. Yoga, meditation, self-help books. Yet, nothing seemed to make a significant difference. Then one day, scrolling through her phone during her lunch break, she stumbled upon an article with an intriguing headline, "What Your Birth Year's Last Digit Says About You." At first, she thought it was just another random clickbait headline, but something about it caught her attention. The author claimed that the last digit of your birth year had a direct correlation to your personality, your career path, and even your destiny. Skeptical but intrigued, Sarah clicked on the article. As she read through the pages, she was hooked. The author explained that numerology, the belief that numbers have mystical significance, had been around for centuries. But what was different about this theory was its focus on the last digit of the year you were born. The article offered examples of famous figures, such as Steve Jobs and Oprah Winfrey, whose achievements were supposedly influenced by the final number in their birth years. Sarah wasn't sure if she believed in it, but something about the idea of discovering more about herself through something as simple as a number felt exciting. What if this was the missing link? The idea that her birth year, that seemingly insignificant piece of information, could reveal something profound about her intrigued her. It seemed almost too good to be true. She had to find out. But before diving deeper, she paused. Her curiosity got the best of her, and she immediately pulled out her phone to check the comments section of the article. To her surprise, many people were raving about their results, claiming that it was eerily accurate. Some were even mentioning famous figures like Elon Musk, who was born in 1971, one year, suggesting that his innovative and risk-taking personality had something to do with that number. She couldn't help but smile at the thought. Could this really work for me, she wondered aloud, staring at her own birth year, 1992. Feeling a rush of excitement mixed with skepticism, Sarah tapped the comments section, asking the readers if anyone had experienced something transformative by applying this theory. Within moments, someone replied, saying that they had learned a lot about themselves by analyzing the last digit of their birth year, and it had completely changed their perspective on their life choices. It was a simple but compelling answer. Sarah felt the tug of curiosity pull her deeper into the mystery. That night, unable to shake the thought from her mind, she decided to do some research of her own. She searched online, reading everything she could find about numerology and the influence of birth years. To her surprise, the topic was more popular than she had ever imagined. People from all over the world were sharing their stories, and many were attributing success, love, and even failures to the last digit of their birth year. Some of the claims seemed far-fetched, but others were strangely accurate. She found herself growing more and more intrigued by the possibilities. But what truly caught her attention was the number 1. According to the article she read, those born in years ending with 1, like Elon Musk, were described as ambitious, creative, and driven by a desire to make a difference in the world. The year 1971, the year Musk was born, was highlighted as a key example. The article went on to say that people born in 1 years often felt an innate urge to push the boundaries of innovation, whether through technology, business, or leadership. Sarah's mind raced. Could the last digit of her birth year, the 2 of 1992, have some similar significance? What did it mean for her? She had always felt that she wasn't like everyone else, that she had a unique path, but could a number really define her future? The questions swirled in her head as she lay in bed that night, her phone still glowing beside her. She had a lot of unanswered questions, and the mystery of her own birth year was only the beginning. But before she could drift off to sleep, one thought lingered. What if this could change everything? The next morning, Sarah woke up with a newfound sense of purpose. She had to know more. She spent the next few hours researching not just the meaning behind the number 2, but also looking into the life of Elon Musk himself. As she read about Musk's childhood, his drive to revolutionize the tech world, and his vision for the future, she felt a strange connection. There was something about his story, his challenges, his triumphs, his determination, that resonated with her. She had always admired Musk's tenacity, his ability to dream big and push boundaries. As she learned more, she couldn't help but feel that perhaps there was something deeper at play. Maybe, just maybe, the numbers had more power than she had ever imagined. Her excitement grew as she began to see the world around her in a new light. Sarah decided to take a bold step. She would not just read about these theories, she would test them. She would speak to people in her life, analyze their birth years, and see if the numbers truly had any correlation to their personalities and experiences. If she could understand the deeper significance of these numbers, she might finally unlock the missing piece of her life. But Sarah knew that this journey wouldn't be easy. It would take time, patience, and, most of all, courage to confront the unknown. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she couldn't ignore the pull any longer. Before she left her apartment that morning, she glanced at her phone one more time and smiled. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She thought to herself. Maybe this was her thing, uncovering the mysteries of the universe, one number at a time. And so, her journey began. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah's world felt a little different now, like she had just discovered a hidden door in the corner of a room she'd been standing in her whole life. The question of whether the last digit of her birth year could unlock something important about her personality had started as a small curiosity. But now, it felt like something bigger. She couldn't ignore it. The more she researched, the more she realized she wasn't the only one asking questions about numerology and the deeper meanings behind seemingly random numbers. It was a Saturday afternoon when Sarah decided to take her search to the next level. Armed with a notebook and her phone, she set out to meet her best friend, Emily, at a local cafe. Emily was the kind of person who didn't shy away from weird theories or New Age ideas. If anyone would understand her fascination with numerology, it was her. The cafe was busy, and the hum of chatter mixed with the clinking of cups and saucers as Sarah slid into the booth across from Emily, who was already sipping on her iced coffee. "Hey, so, you're not gonna believe what I've been reading about," Sarah began, trying to contain her excitement. Emily raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Oh, this sounds good. What's it about?" "It's about the last digit of your birth year," Sarah said, half expecting Emily to laugh. "Apparently, it can reveal a lot about your personality, your fate, and even the way you approach life." Emily leaned in, her curiosity piqued. "Wait, are you talking about numerology? Like, how people think your birth number means something?" "Yes. But specifically, the last digit of your year," Sarah confirmed. "So, for example, people born in years ending with a 1 are supposed to be innovative, creative, and driven. And I've been reading all about Elon Musk, who was born in 1971, a 1 year. And his whole personality aligns with that. The more I read, the more it sounds like it's true." Emily's eyes widened. "Okay, that's interesting. So what does it say about people born in, say, 1992? Sarah smiled, thrilled that Emily was actually taking her seriously. "Well, I'm still looking into it, but so far, I've learned that the number 2 is about balance, harmony, and teamwork. People with this number are said to be good at collaborating, empathetic, and diplomatic. They tend to thrive in partnerships." Emily laughed, a soft chuckle that was half amused, half intrigued. "So, you're saying that your entire personality could be defined by the last digit of your birth year? It sounds crazy, right?" Sarah admitted. But the more I dig into it, the more I start to believe there might be something to it. Emily took another sip of her coffee, clearly deep in thought. Well, if it helps, I've always thought there's something to numbers. I mean, how else do you explain patterns in life? Everything from our daily routines to major events seems to follow some kind of order. Maybe there's something deeper in it. That gave Sarah pause. It was true. Life did seem to follow patterns, some predictable, some not. But could it really be as simple as the last number in your birth year? I want to know if this is legit, Sarah continued, her voice lowering. I've already started researching more about the number 2 and how it might fit my life. But I think I need to test it. I need to see if other people around me fit the description too. Emily raised her eyebrows. So, you're going to ask everyone about their birth years and analyze them based on this? Exactly, Sarah replied with determination. I mean, how else will I know if it's just a coincidence or if there's something real to it? It's not like I have anything to lose. Worst case, I'll just know that I spent way too much time obsessing over a number. But what if it's actually true? Well, I'm game, Emily said with a smile. You know I love a good mystery. The following week, Sarah took her idea to the next level. Armed with her curiosity and a few notes, she started reaching out to friends, family, and even strangers to ask about their birth years. Some were skeptical, some laughed it off, but others were genuinely intrigued. She started with her own family, beginning with her parents. Her father was born in 1960, and her mother in 1965. According to the theory, people born in years ending in 0 or 5 were supposed to be practical, down to earth, and have a strong sense of responsibility. Sarah chuckled at the thought. Both of her parents fit that description to a T. Her dad was a business-minded man, always thinking about the practical side of things, while her mom had a nurturing side that made her incredibly dependable. Next, Sarah spoke to Emily's parents. Emily's dad was born in 1968, and her mom in 1970. The numbers pointed to strong leadership qualities, confidence, and a sense of adventure. Sarah wasn't sure if it was just the personality traits she already knew about them, but she had to admit, the descriptions lined up surprisingly well. By the end of the week, Sarah had spoken to nearly a dozen people, asking only about their birth years. Some people seemed indifferent, but a few had their own theories. Some found the connections too coincidental to ignore. One person, a friend from her yoga class named Amanda, shared that her birth year, 1988, made her feel like a peacemaker, always trying to bring balance into the lives of others. Sarah noted the connection. The more Sarah explored, the more patterns emerged. And while she couldn't be certain just yet that numerology had all the answers, she couldn't ignore how intriguing it was. Each person she spoke to seemed to embody the traits of their number, in some way or another. But there was something else Sarah couldn't ignore. The deeper she got into this theory, the more she realized that it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about the choices people made. She wondered if maybe the number was just a guiding light, a way to push them toward their true potential, a blueprint, but not a prison. As the week wore on, Sarah felt a shift inside her. It was subtle, but undeniable. Something about this quest for answers was more than just about numbers. It was about finding meaning in the everyday moments. Perhaps the numbers weren't magical in the traditional sense. But they offered a new lens through which to view the world. And Sarah, for the first time in a long time, felt like she was on the verge of discovering something truly transformative. Sarah had spent the last few weeks obsessing over the patterns she had uncovered, trying to connect the dots between the last digit of birth years and personality traits. It wasn't just a theory anymore, it was a puzzle she couldn't stop piecing together. She wasn't sure what she was hoping to prove, but there was a thrill in seeing how these numbers seemed to shape people's lives. One afternoon, as Sarah was sipping tea at her favorite cafe, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Emily, and it was more than just a casual check-in. Emily had sent her a link to a YouTube video titled, "How Numerology Shapes Your Destiny, What Your Birth Year Reveals." Curious, Sarah clicked on the link and settled in to watch. The video, hosted by a charismatic speaker named Dr. Robert Jenkins, was unlike anything Sarah had expected. It wasn't a vague discussion about numerology or astrology, it was a deep dive into the psychology behind numbers and their supposed influence on human behavior. Dr. Jenkins explained that the last digit of your birth year could be a reflection of your natural tendencies, but it was also a guide to your inner purpose, the things you were born to accomplish. People born in years ending with 1, like 1971 or 1981, are natural-born leaders and innovators, Dr. Jenkins said. But more than that, they carry with them a unique drive to challenge the status quo. Think about the visionaries in the tech world, like Elon Musk. Their birth years align with their quest to change the world. Sarah paused the video, her mind racing. Could it really be that simple? Elon Musk's groundbreaking work with Tesla and SpaceX was the embodiment of everything the video had described. She had to admit, the patterns were starting to feel a little less coincidental. As the video continued, Dr. Jenkins spoke about people born in 2 years. According to him, these individuals were defined by their ability to bring harmony and peace into the lives of others. They were team players, diplomats, and nurturers, often excelling in careers that required collaboration. The more Sarah thought about it, the more she realized how well this described her own experiences. She had always been the one to mediate arguments, help her friends find common ground, and smooth over tensions in her relationships. Sarah paused the video again, her heart beating faster. If this was true, if these patterns had any real foundation, she was beginning to see herself more clearly than she ever had. But the question lingered, was this just coincidence? Or was something more at play? The next day, Sarah decided to take her research to a new level. She had been talking to people in her life about their birth years, but now she wanted to dive deeper. She needed a more scientific approach. So, she reached out to an old friend from college who had become a psychologist, Dr. James Roberts. He was always skeptical of anything that seemed unproven, but Sarah figured that if anyone could help her assess whether there was any psychological basis for the numerology theory, it was him. Dr. Roberts agreed to meet her, and they sat in a quiet coffee shop in downtown Brooklyn. After the usual pleasantries, Sarah jumped straight to the point. "So, James," she said, "I've been looking into this theory that the last digit of your birth year can reveal something about your personality. I'm not sure if it's just a coincidence, but the more I read about it, the more it seems like there's some kind of pattern. Do you think there's any validity to this idea?" James looked intrigued but cautious. "Well, it's interesting that you bring this up," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "From a psychological perspective, there is something called cognitive bias that could explain why people might see patterns in things that aren't actually there. It's called apophenia, the tendency to perceive connections between unrelated things. So, if you're looking for these patterns, you might start finding them, even if they don't really exist." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I get that. But what about the idea that these numbers might actually align with certain traits? That the numbers aren't just random, but that they influence who we are?" James paused, his fingers tapping the rim of his cup. "There are some studies in psychology about how numbers and symbols affect our behaviors, but it's mostly in terms of how they shape our environment or our decision-making process. For instance, in Chinese culture, the number 8 is considered extremely lucky, and that belief can lead people to make decisions based on that number. But that's more about the psychological power of belief rather than anything intrinsic about the number itself." Sarah frowned, still unsure. "So you're saying that if I feel like I'm more diplomatic because of my birth year ending in 2, it's just a coincidence?" "Not necessarily," James said. "What you might be experiencing is confirmation bias. If you believe that the number 2 makes you more empathetic or cooperative, you might start noticing situations where you act that way, and ignoring the times when you don't. Your mind might be connecting the dots in ways that make the theory seem more valid than it actually is." Sarah considered his words carefully. James was always logical, always looking for patterns in data. And while his explanation made sense, part of her still couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Over the next few days, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about her conversation with James. She spent hours researching cognitive biases and the psychological theories behind numerology. But despite the skepticism, she felt something stirring inside her. There was a part of her that couldn't let go of the idea that there might be more to these numbers than simple coincidence. One evening, Sarah sat in her apartment, reading yet another article about the influence of birth year numbers. She had been so focused on the theory that she had overlooked something important. The more she read, the more she realized that these patterns didn't just define who a person was. They also reflected their potential. Could this numerology theory be more about unlocking hidden potential than simply describing people? Was it possible that the last digit of a birth year was a guide to who someone was meant to be, rather than a rigid label? Sarah was more determined than ever to find out. She wasn't going to let doubt stop her from exploring what could be one of the most profound discoveries of her life. The answers were out there, and she was going to find them. Sarah's thoughts were a whirlwind as she tried to process everything she had learned so far. She had always been someone who needed proof before she believed in something, but the more she dug into the numerology of birth years, the more it felt like there was something real beneath the surface. The patterns were striking, the connections undeniable. Still, her mind kept coming back to one question: was this really just a coincidence? The idea that the last digit of your birth year could hold the key to your destiny was fascinating, but Sarah couldn't shake the skepticism that clung to her. After all, she had spent her life trying to separate fact from fiction. If this numerology theory had any merit, it would have to stand up to more scrutiny. Determined to dig deeper, Sarah reached out to a few people she knew who would be able to help her test this theory, her colleagues from work. There was no shortage of differing personalities at her office, and she figured it would be a good cross-section of people to analyze. So, over the course of the next few days, she started her project, asking everyone she could about their birth years and asking them to describe their personalities based on their experiences. The first person she spoke with was Jonathan, a colleague she'd worked with for a couple of years now. He was born in 1973, which, according to the theory, meant he was born in a 3-year. A year associated with creativity, social connections, and being a natural communicator. Jonathan was known for his charisma, always cracking jokes and being the life of the office. He was the kind of person who made everyone feel like they were part of something bigger than just work. So, Jonathan, do you think the description of someone born in 1973 is accurate for you? Sarah asked one morning as they were getting coffee together. He chuckled, as if he'd already known what she was getting at. You know, it's funny you ask, because when I first heard about numerology, I thought it was a bit out there. But, looking back on my life, I can't deny how much I connect with being a 3. I've always loved talking to people, making connections, and putting ideas together. It's like I was born to be a communicator. Sarah took notes, her curiosity growing. Jonathan's personality aligned so perfectly with the description of someone born in a 3-year. It was hard to ignore. Next, Sarah spoke to her boss, Susan, who was born in 1980. A 0-year, according to the numerology theory, was associated with people who were disciplined, hardworking, and had a strong sense of responsibility. Susan had always been a no-nonsense kind of leader, someone who expected high standards and worked tirelessly to ensure things were done right. Sarah found it hard to picture Susan as anything other than a natural leader. Do you think being born in 1980 has shaped who you are today? Sarah asked as they sat down to discuss a new project. Susan gave a thoughtful nod. You know, I think it has. I've always felt like I was meant to take charge, to organize and manage. I've got a work ethic that never quits, and I don't stop until I've achieved what I set out to do. Maybe it's the 0 in my birth year, always pushing for the next goal, the next step. I think that drives me more than anything. It was uncanny. Sarah couldn't help but be impressed by how well the descriptions fit. As Sarah continued to interview people, she noticed a trend. Each person seemed to embody the traits associated with the last digit of their birth year. Of course, not every aspect of their personality matched perfectly, but the core themes were there. Sarah was starting to feel like she might be onto something significant. But then, just as she was starting to feel confident in her findings, she met someone who completely threw her for a loop, Nina. Nina, who worked in the marketing department, was born in 1991, 1 year. The numerology theory described 1 years as innovative, independent, and driven. But Nina, as Sarah quickly learned, was none of those things. In fact, Nina was perhaps the most shy and reserved person in the office. She preferred to work behind the scenes, blending into the background rather than stepping up as a leader. She wasn't the kind of person to take risks or challenge the status quo. Sarah was thrown off. How could Nina, born in 1 year, be so different from the description? Intrigued, Sarah decided to ask Nina about her experience with the numerology theory. So, Nina, I've been reading about how the last digit of your birth year can define aspects of your personality, and I noticed you were born in 1991, 1 year. How do you think that fits with your life? Nina looked at Sarah for a long moment, a little hesitant. I don't really see it. I've never thought of myself as independent or innovative. I prefer to stay out of the spotlight, work quietly behind the scenes. I'm not someone who likes to push boundaries or take risks. I guess, if anything, I might not be the best example of what 1 year is supposed to be. Sarah was taken aback. Nina's response didn't fit at all with what she had learned about people born in 1 year. But as she sat there, reflecting on Nina's words, something clicked in her mind. Maybe it wasn't about the theory defining who someone was. Maybe it was about uncovering potential. Perhaps the numbers weren't meant to box people into fixed traits, but rather to serve as a guide, a nudge toward their best selves. It was a thought that hadn't occurred to her before, but it made sense. People could be more than the sum of their birth year's digit. Maybe the numbers highlighted their challenges, their opportunities, or the strengths they could cultivate. This discovery made Sarah pause. It wasn't enough to just match a personality to a number. People weren't static, and neither were their potentials. The numbers were guiding forces, not definitive answers. As Sarah walked home that evening, she thought about Nina's response. It made her realize something important. The birth year theory didn't just define people, it revealed their opportunities. Each number pointed to something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface, waiting to be unlocked. Sarah had come full circle. She now saw the theory not as a rigid set of characteristics, but as a framework to help people understand themselves better and uncover their untapped potential. There was still a lot more to uncover, but she was getting closer. The more Sarah thought about her conversation with Nina, the more the pieces of the puzzle started to fall into place. The realization that the last digit of your birth year didn't define you in a limiting way, but rather pointed toward untapped potential, was revolutionary. It was as if the numbers didn't just hold a mirror to who you were, but also to who you could become. The idea that there was always room for growth, transformation, and reinvention intrigued Sarah more than anything. Over the following week, Sarah dove deeper into her research. She began to connect the dots between the birth year numbers and life paths, not just personality traits. The more she explored, the more she felt this was a discovery that could change everything: her life, her relationships, even the way people viewed their potential. But as Sarah continued her investigation, she also started questioning some of her conclusions. Was she seeing what she wanted to see? Was she falling into the trap of confirmation bias? She needed more data. She needed something bigger to test the theory against. One evening, as she sat with her journal in the dim light of her apartment, Sarah had an idea. She decided to take the leap and see if she could apply the theory to a larger, more objective sample of people, perhaps even some of the most well-known figures in history. Elon Musk had been her first inspiration, and it had worked. She felt it was time to push the boundaries of her research. After hours of poring over biographies, articles, and interviews, Sarah came across an intriguing list of famous figures, each born in years ending in different digits. She decided to start with a few names that had always fascinated her: Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, and Maya Angelou. They were icons in their fields, entrepreneurs, activists, and artists, all with unique paths to success. Could the numerology theory apply to them? Steve Jobs, born in 1955, was a 5. According to the numerology theory, people born in a 5 year were meant to embrace change, be adaptable, and excel in environments that required innovation. Steve's life was a perfect match. From his time at Apple, where he revolutionized technology, to his creation of Pixar, which changed the animation industry, Jobs embodied the spirit of a 5. His ability to take risks, break the rules, and think outside the box had made him one of the most influential figures of the 21st century. As Sarah read more about Jobs' life and work, she marveled at how accurately the theory described him. He was the embodiment of a 5, the kind of person who thrived on change and saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. Next, Sarah turned her attention to Oprah Winfrey, born in 1954. Oprah, born in a 4th year, was said to be grounded, practical, and focused on building solid foundations. These people were also deeply empathetic, which was a perfect match for Oprah's career. From her humble beginnings to creating one of the most successful talk shows in history, Oprah built a powerful empire based on trust, authenticity, and connection. Her ability to connect with people, share their stories, and empower them was undoubtedly aligned with the qualities of someone born in a 4th year. Oprah's story only strengthened Sarah's belief in the numerology theory. She was another prime example of a person who embodied the essence of their birth year's digit, and Sarah began to wonder how far she could take this. Was it possible to map the lives of other successful individuals and discover hidden patterns that could explain their rise to prominence? Sarah was starting to see a bigger picture. It wasn't just about understanding someone's personality, it was about seeing how the last digit of their birth year might have shaped the decisions they made, the challenges they faced, and the paths they chose. Then, Sarah found Maya Angelou, born in 1928. A 8 year. According to the numerology theory, people born in 8 years were meant to embrace their power, their inner strength, and their drive for success. Angelou's life, too, was a perfect example of this. From her poetry to her activism, she had taken on some of the most difficult issues of her time. Her work was deeply rooted in strength, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of justice. Maya Angelou didn't just talk about power, she embodied it, in every sense of the word. As Sarah looked at the lives of these 3 individuals, the patterns were unmistakable. Each of them seemed to embody the qualities associated with their birth year digit. Steve Jobs, Oprah Winfrey, and Maya Angelou had all made their mark in unique ways, but their paths, challenges, and successes mirrored the traits of the numbers that had been assigned to them at birth. It was almost as though their birth year numbers had been guiding them toward their true potential all along. But as Sarah continued to reflect on these findings, one question gnawed at her: if these patterns were real, could they predict future success as well? Could someone, born in a 7 year, for example, be destined for a life of introspection, philosophy, or deep wisdom? Could a person born in a 2 year naturally become a leader in diplomacy or charity? And what about those born in years ending in a 9? Were they bound to embrace change and leave a legacy that would inspire generations to come? She had always believed that the future was something people could shape, but the more she researched, the more she wondered, what if there was something about the numbers that could give us an edge? If she could figure out how to map out a person's life path using these digits, maybe she could help others understand their own journeys and unlock their hidden potential. In the following days, Sarah began reaching out to people she had never met before. She started a small survey, asking participants about their birth year, personality traits, and how they perceived their life paths. She didn't tell them about the numerology theory up front, instead letting the participants share their stories freely. As she collected more data, she began to see even clearer correlations between birth year numbers and the life paths they described. There was a growing sense of excitement within Sarah. She wasn't just uncovering something for herself anymore. This could be something bigger, something that could help people unlock the answers they were searching for. The numbers were more than just symbols. They were keys to understanding who you truly were, and, perhaps, who you were always meant to become. As Sarah's project began to grow, so did her confidence in the theory she was exploring. What once seemed like an odd, abstract concept was now shaping into something concrete, something practical. The more she dug into the lives of others, the more convinced she became that numerology wasn't just a quirky belief, it was a tool for self-discovery, growth, and understanding one's true potential. But there was one thing that had been bothering her for days: why did some people defy the traits associated with their birth year? Not everyone she surveyed seemed to match the supposed characteristics of their year. The more she considered this, the more she realized that the theory might not be an all-encompassing explanation. Perhaps the birth year was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. A person's full potential was undoubtedly shaped by numerous factors: upbringing, environment, education, and choices. But the beauty of numerology, Sarah realized, was that it gave individuals a framework to understand the paths they were walking. It wasn't about restricting people into predefined boxes. It was about helping them uncover their strengths, understand their struggles, and inspire them to step into the fullness of who they were meant to be. It was around this time that Sarah met someone who would challenge her beliefs in ways she didn't expect, someone who was as skeptical about the birth year theory as she once was. Her name was Rachel, and she was the new team lead at Sarah's company. Sarah had heard about Rachel from her colleagues, who described her as highly intelligent, analytical, and a bit of a perfectionist. At first glance, Rachel seemed like the polar opposite of Sarah. Where Sarah had once been deeply skeptical of numerology, Rachel seemed like someone who would tear the idea apart with logic and reason. So, when Sarah learned that Rachel was born in 1986, a 6th year, she saw this as an opportunity. Sarah had already begun to understand the general traits of those born in 6 years: caring, responsible, family-oriented, and driven by a sense of duty. But she wasn't sure how Rachel would fit this description. From what Sarah had gathered, Rachel seemed to embody the exact opposite of someone who would put family and responsibility above all else. Her curiosity piqued, Sarah decided to bring up the theory in a casual conversation one day. "So, Rachel," Sarah started, "I've been researching something a little unusual lately, numerology, of all things. I know, sounds a bit out there, right? But have you ever considered how the last digit of your birth year might shape your personality?" Rachel raised an eyebrow, clearly amused but not dismissive. "You're serious?" she asked, chuckling. "What exactly do these numbers say about me, then?" Sarah grinned, eager to get her thoughts out. "Well, you were born in 1986, which means you're a 6th year. People born in 6 years are supposed to be incredibly nurturing, family-oriented, and focused on responsibility. They're natural caregivers, driven by the need to help others." Rachel's smile faltered for a moment. "You know, that's funny, because I don't exactly fit the mold. I've always prided myself on being independent and ambitious. I mean, I like my family, but I've never considered myself the caretaker type. I'm more focused on my career, on proving myself." Sarah paused. This was interesting. It wasn't what she expected to hear from someone born in a 6th year. "But wait," Sarah continued, "what about the part where you care deeply about the people around you? You're very invested in your team's success, and I've noticed how much you value collaboration. That seems pretty 6 to me." Rachel leaned back in her chair, thinking for a moment. "I guess that's true. I do care a lot about the people I work with. I want everyone to succeed, and I do feel a strong sense of responsibility to make sure the team performs well. Maybe, in a way, that's me being a 6 after all." Sarah smiled, sensing an opening. "It's interesting, right? How a person's life path can sometimes push them to embrace qualities they never thought they had. Rachel nodded, though she seemed more reflective than convinced. I'm still not sold on the whole thing, but I'm open to thinking about it more. Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Even if Rachel didn't fully buy into the idea of numerology yet, their conversation had shifted her perspective. She had come to realize something important: people weren't confined by the traits of their birth year. The numbers provided insight, but how a person embodied those traits depended on their own choices, growth, and perspective. In that way, numerology wasn't about fate, it was about self-awareness. Over the next several weeks, Sarah continued her research, but now she was looking at it through a more nuanced lens. She no longer saw the numbers as rigid definitions of who people were, but rather as potential guides, hints at what they could become if they fully embraced their inherent strengths. Each number revealed a path, but the journey was still up to the individual. This new approach not only helped Sarah feel more confident in her research, but it also helped her connect more deeply with the people around her. She found herself viewing her colleagues, friends, and even strangers through a different lens, wondering what their numbers said about them. But more importantly, how they had chosen to shape their own stories. Her next step was clear: Sarah was ready to share her findings with the world. It was time to turn her passion into something larger, a platform where people could explore how their birth year shaped their lives, their choices, and their futures. One evening, after work, Sarah sat at her computer, fingers hovering above the keyboard. She knew this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but she felt a growing sense of purpose. What if this was more than just an interesting theory? What if it could help people unlock their full potential, inspire change, or simply help them understand themselves better? Her heart raced as she clicked "Publish" on the first post of what would soon become a popular blog, "Discover Your Birth Year's Potential." With that simple click, Sarah knew her life had taken a new direction. The numbers weren't just signs of who we were, they were keys to who we could become. The weeks that followed were filled with excitement, nervous anticipation, and a growing sense of fulfillment. Sarah had launched her blog, and to her surprise, it gained traction faster than she'd expected. People from different walks of life were commenting, sharing their experiences, and even sending her messages asking for more personalized guidance. What started as an abstract exploration into the significance of birth years had now evolved into something that resonated deeply with others. Sarah found herself waking up early each morning, eager to check her blog's analytics. The number of subscribers was growing steadily, and more people were participating in the discussions. She had created a space for people to explore their own paths, to understand how their birth year influenced their decisions, and to contemplate the ways in which numerology shaped their life's trajectory. As the blog grew, so did Sarah's curiosity about the deeper forces at play in people's lives. She started reflecting on how easily people got caught in the narrative that life was predetermined, that who you were was merely the sum of your past experiences, genetics, and environment. But what if there was more to it? What if each person had a potential that was encoded deep within them, waiting to be unlocked? It wasn't just about astrology or numerology, Sarah thought. It was about recognizing that there were unseen forces shaping the way people moved through the world. The way a person reacted to a challenge, the choices they made under pressure, or the paths they chose when faced with a crossroads, these weren't all random. There were patterns to be understood, and she had begun to uncover just a small piece of the puzzle. One of her readers, a woman named Julia, had sent Sarah a long message one evening. Julia's story was striking, and it added a new layer to Sarah's growing understanding of the birth year theory. Julia had been born in 1991, a 1 year, which meant she was meant to be independent, innovative, and a natural leader. But in her message, she shared how, for years, she had felt trapped in a life that didn't align with her true self. Despite her birth year traits pointing to someone who should thrive in leadership positions, she had always felt too afraid to pursue her ambitions. She worked a stable desk job, living a life that was comfortable but not fulfilling. "I've read everything you've posted on your blog, and it's got me thinking," Julia wrote. For most of my life, I've avoided taking risks. I've always felt like there was something more I could do, but I've held myself back. Now I realize it's not just about my job or my routine, it's about facing who I really am. I was born in a 1 year, which should make me an independent leader, but I've spent so much time second-guessing myself. Julia continued to explain how her fear had been her greatest obstacle, and how she had subconsciously chosen a path of safety, even though she felt the pull of something greater. She wanted to start her own business, to step into her own power, but self-doubt always held her back. But something was changing for her after reading Sarah's blog. "Your posts made me realize something," Julia concluded. "I've been living out of fear, not based on the potential my birth year tells me I should embrace. I'm starting to see that I've always had the strength to pursue my own dreams. And now I'm ready to take that step." Reading Julia's message struck Sarah deeply. It reminded her that, despite the patterns and theories, people could still make choices that went beyond their circumstances. The power of the theory wasn't just in predicting one's life path, but in empowering individuals to change their path when they felt ready. Julia's story also made Sarah think about her own life. She, too, had once felt uncertain about her own direction. She had been afraid to embrace her full potential, just like Julia, in the early days of her research. Now, through her blog and her exploration of numerology, Sarah was beginning to feel like she had found her purpose. But even as she felt this pull toward understanding the forces shaping her life, Sarah was still uncertain about how to fully leverage her discoveries. Was this just a passing interest, or was it something more? She was unsure if she wanted this project to be her full-time career or if it was simply a stepping stone towards something greater. One evening, as Sarah was pondering this, she received an email that would change everything. It was an invitation to speak at an upcoming conference about personal development and self-growth. The organizers had read her blog and believed her research into birth years could provide fresh insight into how people could tap into their fullest potential. They wanted her to present her findings to a group of professionals, thought leaders, and entrepreneurs. At first, Sarah thought the email might be a joke. Who would want to hear her speak? She wasn't an expert in numerology or psychology, and this was far from her comfort zone. But as the email continued, the invitation became more compelling. The organizers believed her insights could help people understand their hidden strengths and offer a unique perspective on how self-awareness could lead to profound personal transformation. For the next few days, Sarah wrestled with the decision. This opportunity could be a game-changer. If she spoke at the conference, it would open doors to a broader audience, and perhaps even to a new career. But it also felt like an overwhelming leap. Was she ready to stand in front of an audience and share her beliefs? Was she confident enough to be the face of something so new and unproven? Late one night, Sarah sat by her window, looking out at the city skyline. The lights below flickered like a million possibilities. The quiet hum of the world seemed to speak to her, urging her to take the plunge. She had always feared standing out, but now she saw that this moment, this opportunity, could be the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. Taking a deep breath, Sarah clicked the "Accept Invitation" button. It was time to share her findings with the world, to reveal that the power to change, to grow, to shape one's destiny, was not a far-off dream, but a reality. Her heart raced as she sat back, staring at the confirmation email. In that moment, Sarah realized something important: the forces that shaped her life, the ones she had been researching, were not just abstract theories. They were already present, already guiding her in ways she hadn't understood until now. She was stepping into a new phase, one where she wasn't just a student of these forces, but a part of them, and she was ready to embrace that. The days leading up to the conference were a blur. Sarah spent hours refining her presentation, ensuring that each slide clearly communicated her findings, while balancing her full-time job and managing the increasing attention her blog was garnering. Each time she sat at her computer to rehearse, doubt crept in. What if people didn't take her seriously? What if they thought her ideas were too unconventional? The fear of being judged gnawed at her, but she pushed through, reminding herself that this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. Her phone buzzed on her desk, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Sarah, are you still going to that conference? I heard it's a big deal. Would love to hear about how things are going." Rachel had been following Sarah's progress closely, even sharing her blog with her own network. Sarah had been a little surprised by Rachel's growing interest in her work, especially given how skeptical she had been about numerology in the beginning. But it seemed like Rachel was coming around, and that felt like validation in some way. She quickly typed back a reply, "Yes, the conference is coming up soon. Honestly, I'm a bit nervous, but I'm excited too. It feels like everything is building up to this moment." Rachel responded with a simple, but encouraging message, "You've got this. Just remember. People are interested in your perspective, not just the facts. Be yourself, and you'll do great." Sarah smiled at the message. Rachel's words offered more reassurance than she'd realized she needed. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly, and she took a deep breath. She was ready. The night before the conference, Sarah couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what awaited her the next day. What if the room was filled with experts who would easily dismiss her ideas? What if she froze during her speech? Every worst-case scenario seemed to play out in her mind, but she tried to push it away. She couldn't let her fears control her, not now. At dawn, Sarah finally got out of bed. She dressed in a smart, professional outfit, a simple black dress with a blazer, the same one she'd worn to her last big presentation at work. She looked at herself in the mirror, giving herself a pep talk. "You've come this far. This is just the next step in the journey. You're more than capable of doing this." As she made her way to the conference, Sarah couldn't help but feel a rush of anticipation. The city skyline stretched out before her as she drove, a constant reminder of the world beyond her own worries. The weight of her insecurities still lingered, but she was determined not to let them define her. When she arrived at the conference center, she was immediately struck by the energy in the air. There were people everywhere, all seemingly busy with conversations, checking in, and getting ready for the event. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but she did her best to stay calm. After checking in, she found her seat and sat quietly, absorbing the atmosphere around her. The auditorium slowly filled with attendees, and soon, the event began. As the keynote speaker finished his presentation, Sarah was ushered backstage. The moment of truth was approaching, and she felt her nerves intensify with each passing second. It was time for her to step out and present her work to the crowd. Her name was called, and she walked to the front of the room. The lights were bright, almost blinding, and she could barely make out the audience in front of her. All she could focus on was the mic in her hand and the screen behind her. She took a deep breath, cleared her throat, and began. "Hello, everyone," she started, her voice slightly shaky at first. "My name is Sarah, and today I want to talk to you about something that's been shaping my life, and now, it's shaping the lives of others too." Sarah glanced at the screen behind her, where her first slide appeared. It read, "What your birth year says about you, the last digit revealed." She paused for a moment, allowing the title to sink in. Then, she dove into her presentation. As Sarah moved through her slides, explaining how the last digit of one's birth year could offer insight into core personality traits and potential paths, she began to feel more at ease. The crowd was engaged, listening intently, and Sarah noticed a few heads nodding as she explained the connection between the numbers and the traits she had uncovered. She spoke with growing confidence, her passion for the topic coming through in every word. She described the personalities of people born in 1 years, the creative independence of those born in 3 years, and the compassionate nature of those born in 6 years. As she went through each number, she illustrated the concepts with real-life examples, some of which came from her own experiences and the stories of her blog readers, like Julia. But it wasn't just the content of her presentation that resonated with the audience. It was her genuine belief in what she was sharing. Sarah wasn't just talking about numbers. She was sharing a vision of self-discovery, growth, and possibility. The room fell into a thoughtful silence as people absorbed the ideas she was putting forth. As Sarah reached the final slide, she felt a surge of emotion. It was almost over. The last few words spilled from her lips with conviction. Ultimately, what I want people to understand is this: your birth year doesn't dictate who you are, but it gives you a powerful roadmap to understanding your strengths, challenges, and potential. It's not fate that defines us, but our awareness of ourselves and our choices. We each have the power to shape our future. The room erupted in applause. Sarah felt her chest swell with pride and relief. She had done it. She had shared her vision, and it had connected with others. After the presentation, Sarah was flooded with messages from attendees who wanted to learn more. Some asked questions about how they could incorporate the birth year theory into their own lives, while others expressed their gratitude for the insights she had shared. Sarah had never felt more alive, more in sync with her purpose. It wasn't just about the theory anymore, it was about the difference it was making in people's lives. That evening, as Sarah sat alone in her hotel room, her mind buzzed with possibilities. The conference had been a success, but it wasn't the end of the road. It was the beginning of something much larger. She opened her laptop and checked her email. Among the messages was one from Julia. "I just wanted to tell you again how much your blog and your presentation have meant to me. I've started taking small steps toward my dream of opening my own business. I can't thank you enough for showing me that I'm capable of more than I thought." Sarah smiled and typed a quick reply, "I'm so proud of you, Julia. Keep going, you're on the right path." It was moments like this that made it all worth it. Sarah had always believed in the power of transformation, and now, she was witnessing it firsthand. The days after the conference passed in a whirlwind. Sarah had never felt so energized, so connected to her purpose. Each new email, comment, and message from the conference attendees confirmed something she had already suspected: this wasn't just a passing interest for her, it was a movement. A movement toward self-discovery, understanding, and transformation. As she sat at her desk the morning after the conference, reviewing the notes she had taken, Sarah realized that the impact of her presentation was far-reaching. People weren't just interested in the concept of birth years anymore. They were beginning to see how the theory could be applied to every part of their lives, their careers, relationships, personal growth, and self-awareness. The excitement didn't stop with the attendees. In the days following the conference, Sarah's blog saw a significant uptick in traffic. Her social media followers grew exponentially as well, with people engaging in lively discussions about how their birth year shaped their lives. Many of them, just like Julia, began to recognize patterns they hadn't seen before, and they were eager to share their stories with Sarah and others in the community. One particular comment caught Sarah's attention. It was from a man named Tyler, born in 1987, 7-year. Tyler had shared that he had spent most of his life feeling disconnected, always searching for something more, something deeper. He had worked a series of unfulfilling jobs and never seemed to find a career that resonated with him. His comment read, "I've spent most of my life questioning what I'm supposed to do." The idea of being a 7, someone with a thirst for knowledge and introspection, actually makes a lot of sense. "I never thought about it this way before. Maybe it's time for me to stop running away from the things that truly interest me and start embracing them." Sarah read Tyler's message several times, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. This was the power of the work she had done. It wasn't just a theory to be studied or dismissed, it was a tool that allowed people to step into their truth, their authenticity. A few days later, Sarah met with Rachel for coffee to discuss how things had been going since the conference. Rachel was still buzzing with excitement from the event and had 1,000 questions for Sarah about her future plans. "I'm so proud of you, Sarah," Rachel said, sipping her coffee. "You were amazing up there. I can't believe how quickly everything took off after your presentation. People are really connecting with your message." Sarah smiled, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had built something meaningful, but she still didn't know where to take it next. What was her next step? She had always believed in the power of transformation, but now, she was faced with the challenge of transforming her own life in a way that would align with this new path she had chosen. Well, thank you. It's been amazing, but I'm starting to feel like I need something more, Sarah admitted. The blog is growing, the conference was a success, but I don't know where I fit into all of this. I don't have a specific career path that aligns with what I'm doing now. I don't know if I want to keep this as a side project or turn it into something full-time. Rachel paused and gave Sarah a knowing look. You're overthinking it. Don't worry about where you fit just yet. The key is to stay true to what you're doing. The opportunities will come. You've already created something people need. You're helping people understand themselves in ways they never have before. The more you lean into that, the clearer everything will become. Rachel's words were comforting, but they didn't entirely quiet Sarah's unease. The truth was, Sarah had no idea how to make this sustainable. She was still working her full-time job and managing the blog, but something told her that to truly make an impact, she would need to devote herself to this full-time. But that meant taking risks, and that was something Sarah had always struggled with. She had always been cautious, always played it safe. Later that evening, as Sarah sat on her couch, scrolling through the messages on her blog, she was interrupted by a notification on her phone. It was an email from a company called Pathfinder Coaching, a well-known firm that specialized in helping individuals find clarity in their career paths and personal growth. The email was an invitation to collaborate on a new project. One that aligned perfectly with Sarah's message about birth years and self-discovery. The email read, "Dear Sarah, we've been following your blog and your recent presentation at the conference. We believe your unique perspective on how birth years influence personal growth and decision-making could be an invaluable addition to our coaching services. We would love to discuss a potential partnership and how we can bring your insights to a larger audience." Sarah stared at the email in disbelief. This was the kind of opportunity she had been hoping for, but it also felt overwhelming. Was this the right move? Should she take the plunge and pursue it? Before she could respond, another message popped up, this one from Julia. "Sarah, I just wanted to say thank you again for everything. You've inspired me to finally take the leap and start my own business. I've spent years wondering if I was capable of being successful on my own, and your blog made me realize that I have what it takes. It's scary, but I'm doing it. And I couldn't have made this decision without your encouragement." Sarah felt a wave of emotion wash over her as she read Julia's message. This was why she had started this journey in the first place, to help others discover their potential. And now, here she was, standing on the edge of her own transformation. That night, as Sarah lay in bed, she thought about the decisions that lay ahead. The email from Pathfinder Coaching was the validation she had been seeking. But it also represented a leap into the unknown. The leap that Julia had taken when she started her own business. The leap Sarah had to make for herself. The next morning, she made the decision. She hit reply on the email from Pathfinder Coaching and wrote, "I would love to explore this opportunity further. Let's schedule a meeting." She took a deep breath. This was the beginning of her next chapter. She didn't know exactly where it would take her, but she was ready for whatever came next. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The meeting with Pathfinder Coaching was scheduled for the following week. Sarah spent the days leading up to it researching the company, reading testimonials from their clients, and reflecting on what this partnership could mean for her. It felt like a golden opportunity, but there was also a gnawing sense of uncertainty. Could she really pivot her career in such a significant way? Was she ready to fully embrace this path, where the stakes felt so high? As Sarah prepared for the meeting, her thoughts drifted back to the message from Julia. It was a reminder of the power of small decisions, the kind that could change the course of someone's life. Julia had taken the leap, and now she was stepping into her own purpose. Sarah knew, deep down, that she was facing a similar moment, one that could propel her into a completely new chapter. The day of the meeting arrived. Sarah dressed in a professional, yet comfortable outfit, a white blouse paired with a black skirt and blazer. She wanted to feel confident, yet approachable, someone who could be both knowledgeable and authentic. As she drove to the office of Pathfinder Coaching, her palms began to sweat. She wasn't nervous about the presentation itself, she had given many presentations before, and this one wouldn't be much different. What made this meeting different, however, was the possibility it represented. If things went well, she could be taking her work to a whole new level. When Sarah entered the conference room, she was greeted by two representatives from the company, Emily, the CEO, and James, the head of client relations. Both of them were warm and welcoming, offering her a seat as they introduced themselves. "Thank you for coming, Sarah," Emily said with a smile. "We've been following your blog and the insights you shared at the conference. I have to say, we're really impressed with the way you're using numerology to help people understand themselves. It's not something we see often, but it's incredibly powerful." Sarah felt a wave of relief. It was always reassuring to hear that her work was being recognized, especially by people she respected. She smiled and replied, "Thank you, I'm really passionate about it. I believe it's a tool for self-discovery and growth." James nodded in agreement. "Absolutely. And that's exactly why we think this could be such a great partnership. Our clients are often at a crossroads in their lives. Struggling with career choices, personal challenges, or major life transitions. The idea of using something as personal as birth years to guide them toward their true potential really resonates with what we're trying to do here." The conversation shifted from pleasantries to more substantive matters. Sarah shared her vision for how numerology could be integrated into their coaching services, emphasizing how the power of self-awareness could be transformative. She talked about the different numbers and how they could help people understand their strengths, weaknesses, and life purpose. As Sarah spoke, she could feel the energy in the room shift. Both Emily and James were leaning forward, listening intently to every word she said. She realized that she wasn't just pitching a theory, she was offering them something that could truly enhance the work they were already doing. This wasn't just about her or her ideas, it was about helping people. By the end of the meeting, Sarah had a clear sense of the potential collaboration. Emily and James were eager to move forward, and the two sides agreed to discuss terms in the coming days. As they parted ways, Sarah felt a surge of excitement. This could be the beginning of something big. Over the next few days, Sarah's life seemed to shift into a new gear. She continued to run her blog, but now she was also working on the partnership with Pathfinder Coaching. The more she thought about it, the more excited she became. She could already envision the workshops, the one-on-one sessions, and the materials that could be created around the birth year concept. But with the excitement came a heavy dose of uncertainty. Sarah had spent years building her career in a completely different direction. She had always been cautious and methodical, and the idea of jumping into something so new, without knowing exactly what the future held, felt terrifying. Her conversations with Rachel became even more frequent during this time. Rachel, who had always been Sarah's biggest cheerleader, kept reminding her of the potential she had. "You've already seen how powerful your ideas can be, Sarah," Rachel would say. "This is just the next step. If you keep doubting yourself, you might miss out on something incredible." Despite the support, Sarah couldn't help but wonder what it would mean to fully commit to this new direction. What would she be giving up? Was it too risky? Was she ready to let go of the safety and security she had known for so long? One evening, after a particularly long day of work, Sarah found herself walking through the park near her apartment. She needed space to clear her head, to think through all the possibilities. As she walked, she noticed a man sitting on a bench, scribbling in a notebook. He looked up as she passed by and smiled. "Nice evening," he said. Sarah smiled back and nodded. "Yes, it is." The man motioned to the empty spot next to him. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" Sarah hesitated for only a moment before sitting down beside him. There was something calming about the quiet of the park, and she appreciated the opportunity to take a brief break from her overactive mind. They exchanged pleasantries, and Sarah learned that the man's name was Daniel. He was an artist who spent his days creating and his evenings writing. After a few minutes of conversation, Sarah found herself telling him about the crossroads she was facing. "I've spent so much time building a stable career," she said, "but now, I feel like I'm on the verge of something new. Something different. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for it." Daniel paused for a moment, watching the sunset before replying. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes the hardest part isn't making the decision. It's trusting that the decision you make will lead you to where you're meant to be. There's no map to follow, only the path you choose to create." His words hit Sarah in a way she hadn't expected. They weren't a solution, but they were a reminder. There was no perfect answer. There was only the choice to step forward. That night, Sarah went to bed feeling more at peace than she had in weeks. She knew that the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it, fully and without hesitation. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of clarity. She made her decision. She would take the leap, and she would trust that everything she had worked for, everything she had learned, had led her to this moment. She opened her laptop, typed a message to Emily and James at Pathfinder Coaching, and hit send. The decision was made, and with it came a sense of relief and excitement that Sarah hadn't felt in years. She sat back in her chair, staring at the email confirmation she had just sent to Emily and James at Pathfinder Coaching. It was official now. She was stepping into a new chapter of her life. A chapter that was uncertain and unknown, but full of promise and potential. As the days passed, Sarah's focus shifted entirely to the upcoming collaboration. She had officially resigned from her corporate job, a decision that had felt both terrifying and liberating. No more balancing the two worlds. Her past career, which had provided stability but little fulfillment, and the present journey, where her heart and passion truly lay. That first week after leaving her job, Sarah felt the weight of change pressing in on her. She was no longer bound by the constraints of her previous routine, but the sense of freedom was both exhilarating and intimidating. It was as though she had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back. One afternoon, Sarah sat at her kitchen table, reviewing the plans for her first joint workshop with Pathfinder Coaching. The theme was, Unlocking Your True Potential Using Birth Year Numerology. She had carefully crafted an outline, weaving together key concepts about how the numbers in our birth year could reveal hidden aspects of our personality, career paths, and life's purpose. She was excited about the opportunity to share this knowledge with a wider audience, but as the workshop date neared, she found herself questioning whether she was truly prepared. The doubt crept in slowly at first, like a whispering voice in the back of her mind. What if no one shows up? What if they don't understand the material? What if this whole thing falls apart? She quickly pushed the thoughts aside, reminding herself that she had spent months building this idea, and it had already been well received by her followers and at the conference. But the fear still lingered, gnawing at her. After all, it was one thing to share her ideas in the relative safety of her blog and social media accounts, and another to stand in front of a room full of people and guide them through a life-changing experience. The day of the workshop arrived. Sarah woke up early, pacing around her apartment as she prepared for the event. She had made sure to get everything ready the night before. The slides, the handouts, the interactive exercises. There was no turning back now. She had worked hard for this moment, and it was time to trust in herself and her ability to help others. As she entered the conference room where the workshop would take place, Sarah was greeted by Emily and James. Both of them were busy setting up the space, but they took a moment to reassure her. "You've got this, Sarah," Emily said with a warm smile. "You've prepared so well, and we believe in you." James nodded in agreement. "This is just the beginning. You're about to make a real impact." Despite their encouragement, Sarah still felt a knot in her stomach. The room was filled with empty chairs, all waiting to be filled by strangers who had come for the workshop. She took a deep breath and stepped to the front, setting her notes on the podium. She could hear the soft hum of voices outside the room, the buzz of anticipation as people arrived. The clock ticked down to the start of the workshop, and Sarah's heart began to race. She had to remind herself why she was here. This wasn't just about her. It was about helping people understand their own potential, about giving them the tools to create the lives they had always wanted. The workshop began with a brief introduction, and as people filed in, Sarah could feel her nerves start to calm. The room filled quickly, and soon, there were over 30 people seated, all eager to learn. Sarah welcomed them, and once the formalities were out of the way, she began her presentation. She started by explaining the concept of birth year numerology, how the last digit of a person's birth year could provide deep insights into their personality and life path. She guided them through an exercise where each person could calculate their own number and discover what it meant for their strengths, challenges, and purpose. As she spoke, Sarah could see the reactions on their faces. Some were nodding in recognition, others were scribbling furiously in their notebooks. She could tell that the information was resonating, and that was all she needed to stay focused. During a break, a woman named Lisa came up to Sarah, eyes wide with excitement. "I never thought about it like this before," she said. "I'm a 4, and I've always felt like I was too structured and rigid, but now I see that it's actually one of my strengths. I've been struggling with my career for years, but now I'm starting to understand why I feel so driven to create order and systems." Sarah smiled, grateful for the feedback. "Exactly. Your 4 energy is about creating stability and structure. You're a natural organizer. When you embrace that part of yourself, you'll find that it leads you to the right path." The workshop continued, with more personal revelations and discoveries unfolding before Sarah's eyes. She was struck by how powerful the combination of self-awareness and numerology could be. People were not only learning about themselves, but they were also beginning to understand how their unique energy could guide them through their challenges. By the end of the workshop, Sarah felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The day had gone smoothly, and she had seen firsthand how her work had a profound impact on others. People were asking questions, sharing stories, and expressing gratitude. Some even approached her afterward to ask if she would consider offering one-on-one sessions or creating more in-depth workshops. As Sarah packed up her materials, Emily and James came over to congratulate her. "You did an amazing job, Sarah," Emily said. "People were really engaged. We can't wait to see where this goes." James grinned. "You've got something special here. This is just the beginning." Sarah's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. She had taken the leap, and now she was seeing the fruits of her labor. The fear and doubt she had felt before the workshop seemed so distant now. She had proven to herself that she was capable, and more importantly, that her work could help others in meaningful ways. That night, as Sarah sat at her desk, reflecting on the day, she thought about all the people who had been touched by the workshop. It wasn't just about the numbers or the theory. It was about the connections, the realizations, and the growth that had taken place. She had helped people see themselves in a new light, and that was worth everything. She glanced at the email from Emily and James, who had already suggested dates for the next workshop. Sarah smiled to herself. This was the life she had always dreamed of, helping others find their true purpose while discovering her own along the way. The days following the successful workshop seemed to pass in a blur. Sarah's inbox was flooded with positive feedback, and her social media accounts were filled with comments and messages from attendees who were eager to learn more. The overwhelming response was both humbling and exhilarating. She had always believed in the power of her work, but seeing people respond so positively validated everything she had done to get to this point. Emily and James from Pathfinder Coaching were just as enthusiastic. They had already started planning the next workshop and were discussing ways to expand their collaboration. Sarah felt the momentum building, but in the quiet moments, she still couldn't shake the feeling that this was all happening so quickly. She had stepped into this new chapter of her life without fully realizing the weight of the leap she had taken. For so long, she had lived a life driven by careful planning, security, and predictability. But now, every decision she made seemed to come with a new layer of uncertainty. The risk, while thrilling, was also terrifying. One evening, Sarah sat in the small coffee shop she often visited to clear her mind. It was one of those cozy places where the world seemed to slow down, and the hum of conversation blended with the clinking of coffee cups. She found a quiet corner, sipped her tea, and began to reflect on the whirlwind that had been the last few weeks. Her phone buzzed on the table, and she glanced at the screen. It was a message from Rachel. "How are you holding up? I know things are moving fast, but you're doing amazing. So proud of you. Let's catch up soon." Rachel's words brought a small smile to Sarah's face. It felt good to have someone who believed in her, someone who was there for her even as her world shifted around her. She typed a quick response, then put her phone down and stared out the window, lost in thought. It had been years since Sarah had taken a leap like this. Back when she had first chosen her career path, it had been a choice made out of necessity, stability, security, and the pressure to meet expectations. Now, the stakes felt different. She wasn't just choosing a job, she was choosing herself. She was choosing a life that felt authentic, even if it meant stepping into the unknown. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sarah found herself preparing for the second workshop, working on her upcoming book proposal, and connecting with new clients who were interested in one-on-one numerology sessions. The pace was grueling, but every night, when she lay down to sleep, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunities unfolding before her. Still, with every new success, there was an undercurrent of doubt that remained, gnawing at her. She had always been cautious, never one to take risks without thoroughly assessing the potential consequences. Yet, now, with the growing demands of her new career, she couldn't help but wonder, was she really cut out for this? One evening, after a particularly long day of client meetings and preparing for the next workshop, Sarah received a call from her mother, which took her by surprise. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said, trying to hide the weariness in her voice. "Everything okay?" Her mother's voice on the other end was warm and familiar. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. I just wanted to check in. How are things going with your new venture?" Sarah smiled, feeling a wave of relief at the familiar sound of her mother's voice. She leaned back in her chair, letting the weight of the conversation settle in. "It's going well," Sarah said, though she couldn't fully hide the exhaustion in her voice. "I'm learning a lot. I've been doing workshops and one-on-one sessions, and people seem to really connect with the work. But, I don't know, sometimes it feels like it's all moving so fast. I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing, you know." Her mother's tone shifted, and Sarah could sense the wisdom behind her words. "I do know, darling. But I'll tell you this, when you're doing something you love, even the tough moments are worth it. And remember, no one ever gets everything right from the start. The key is to keep moving forward. And when you're passionate about what you do, that's what people will see. They'll follow your energy, your belief in what you're offering." Sarah's chest tightened at her mother's words. She had always admired her mother's quiet strength, her ability to navigate life's challenges with grace. And yet, it wasn't until this moment that Sarah realized how much her mother had sacrificed to give her the life she had. "I'll keep that in mind, Mom," Sarah said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Sometimes I feel like I'm not ready." Her mother laughed softly. "None of us are ever really ready, sweetheart. But that's the beauty of it. You're learning as you go, and that's what makes it worth it. Just keep your heart in it." That conversation with her mother stayed with Sarah for the rest of the evening. She replayed her mother's words over and over in her mind, "No one is ever really ready. It was a small thing, a simple reminder, but it carried a powerful truth. The next day, as Sarah sat down to prepare for her second workshop with Pathfinder coaching, she felt the weight of her mother's wisdom grounding her. It wasn't about having all the answers or being perfectly prepared. It was about embracing the journey, trusting in her abilities, and allowing herself to grow along the way. As Sarah stepped into the conference room for the second workshop, she was met with the same nerves as before, but this time, they felt different. They weren't signs of doubt. Instead, they were a reminder that she was pushing her limits, stepping into new territory. And that was exactly where she needed to be. The room was full once again, and Sarah felt the familiar spark of excitement. This was the life she had chosen, the one she had worked so hard to create, and she was determined to make the most of it. As the workshop began, Sarah's confidence grew with each passing moment. She had learned that it wasn't about being perfect. It was about being present, being genuine, and allowing her passion to shine through. By the end of the session, people were once again approaching her with gratitude and questions, eager to learn more about their numerology and how it could impact their lives. That evening, as Sarah drove home, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. She still didn't have all the answers, and the road ahead was uncertain. But one thing was clear, she was on the right path. She was doing what she was meant to do, and that was enough. The doubts might come and go, but Sarah knew she had made the right choice. She had taken the leap of faith, and in doing so, she had found a sense of purpose that was worth every moment of uncertainty. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new challenges and opportunities. Sarah had barely settled into her new rhythm when the unexpected struck. The second workshop, though successful, was followed by a surge in demand for her services. She found herself juggling more clients, more workshops, and more speaking engagements than she had anticipated. Each day felt like a race against time, and Sarah was starting to feel the strain. As the demand for her services grew, so did the pressure. For the first time since she had made the decision to leave her corporate job, Sarah began to wonder if she had made a mistake. She had never imagined this level of growth, and the sheer volume of work was beginning to wear on her. One late afternoon, as Sarah sat at her desk, reviewing her schedule for the coming month, she felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Emails from clients requesting appointments, social media messages flooding in, and the constant task of managing her workshop schedule, it was all becoming overwhelming. Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Rachel. "Hey, I know you've been crazy busy, but let's catch up soon. You sound like you're getting stretched pretty thin. Remember, you can't pour from an empty cup." Sarah's heart sank as she read the message. She hadn't spoken to Rachel in days, too wrapped up in her work to even check in with her best friend. The truth was, Sarah had been avoiding the conversation because she knew Rachel was right. She had been neglecting her own well-being in the pursuit of success. Sarah quickly typed a response. "I think you're right. It's just been a lot lately. I don't want to disappoint anyone, but I feel like I'm running on empty." Rachel's reply was instant. "You're doing incredible things, Sarah, but you need to take care of yourself too. Let's talk soon, okay?" The words echoed in Sarah's mind as she set her phone down. She was proud of the work she was doing, but the sacrifices were starting to take a toll. There was no balance. She had traded her old routine for one that left no room for rest, reflection, or even connection with those who mattered most to her. The next day, as Sarah was preparing for her third workshop with Pathfinder coaching, she realized something had to change. She had been pushing herself so hard to meet everyone's expectations, her clients, her collaborators, even her own, that she had lost sight of the reason she had started this journey in the first place, to help others, but also to find personal fulfillment. It was time to reevaluate. She reached out to Emily and James, asking if they could meet before the workshop. They agreed, and Sarah arrived at the meeting room early, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately," Sarah began, settling into the chair across from them. "I'm struggling to keep up with the workload, and I'm worried I'm burning out." Emily and James exchanged a look, both nodding in understanding. Emily spoke first. "Sarah, you're doing amazing work. It's no surprise that your services are in high demand. But you're right, it's important to take care of yourself. We've seen you pushing hard, and we know how much you care about your clients. But you can't give your best when you're running on empty." James added, "We're all in this together. If you need help managing the workload, we're here to support you. You don't have to do it all by yourself." The support from Emily and James was exactly what Sarah needed to hear. She realized that the reason she had been so overwhelmed was because she had tried to carry everything on her shoulders without asking for help. She had been afraid that if she let go of any control, she might fail, or that others might not see her as capable. But in that moment, surrounded by people who genuinely believed in her, Sarah understood that asking for help didn't make her weak. It made her human. That evening, as Sarah sat at her apartment with a cup of tea, she made a list of things she needed to change. It was time to set better boundaries, prioritize her mental health, and ask for help when necessary. She realized that in order to continue doing what she loved, she had to first take care of herself. She called Rachel to catch up, and the conversation felt like a breath of fresh air. Rachel listened patiently as Sarah vented about the challenges she had been facing. "You're doing so much good, Sarah," Rachel said when Sarah had finished. "But you can't keep doing it if you're not taking care of yourself. Remember, you're not a machine. You're human." It was the same advice Sarah had heard before, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't just a reminder, it was a wake-up call. The world wasn't going to fall apart if she took a step back. In fact, she believed that by taking care of herself, she could show up even better for the people who relied on her. The next day, Sarah took action. She revised her schedule, cutting back on some of her commitments and delegating tasks where she could. She contacted Emily and James and asked if they could assist with some of the workshop planning, giving her a bit more breathing room. She also made a commitment to herself to take weekends off, something she hadn't done in months. She needed to recharge, to remember why she started this journey in the first place. As she sent out the changes to her clients and collaborators, Sarah felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had taken control of the situation, and in doing so, she had freed herself from the pressure that had been weighing her down. That weekend, Sarah finally allowed herself to take a break. She spent the day in the park, reading a book and enjoying the simple pleasure of being outdoors. It was a rare moment of peace, and it was just what she needed. The following Monday, when she returned to her work, she felt like a new person. The rest had given her a fresh perspective. She was recharged and ready to take on whatever came her way, but this time, with balance and a renewed sense of purpose. As Sarah prepared for her next workshop, she felt a sense of calm that had eluded her for weeks. She had learned an important lesson during the storm of the last few weeks. It wasn't about avoiding the challenges, it was about learning to navigate them with grace and self-compassion. Life wasn't going to slow down, and she couldn't control everything. But she could control how she responded to it. And with that, she felt ready to face whatever the future held. The weeks following Sarah's decision to reevaluate her workload were some of the most fulfilling and eye-opening she had experienced. With her newfound commitment to balance, she found herself not only more productive but also more present in every aspect of her life. The workshops continued to be a success, and her clients praised her for the authenticity and depth she brought to her sessions. But there was something else that had changed within her, a quiet confidence that didn't rely on the external validation she had once sought. She had learned that success was not just about doing more. It was about doing what mattered, doing it well, and doing it with intention. One evening, after a particularly successful session with a corporate client who had brought numerology into their team-building exercises, Sarah sat at her desk, reflecting on the progress she had made. The room around her felt quieter than usual. The soft hum of the city below was the only sound she could hear, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to just sit in the stillness. Her phone buzzed again, and she glanced at the screen. It was a text from Emily. "Hey, I've been thinking. I know you've been working hard on everything, but what if we took this to the next level? What if we created a bigger event? A summit or retreat where you could speak to a larger audience?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The idea of a larger event had always been a distant dream, something she had put off for another day, another year, when she felt ready. But was she ready now? She quickly typed a response. "I love the idea, but I'm not sure I'm ready to take on something that big yet." Within seconds, Emily replied. "Listen, Sarah, you've already done the hard part. You're connecting with people in a deep way. You've built something amazing, and it's growing faster than you may realize. If we start planning now, we can create something really impactful. You don't have to do it alone. We'll be with you every step of the way." Sarah sat back in her chair, staring at the message. It was a tempting idea, but there was that familiar voice in her head, the one that warned her about taking on too much, about stepping outside her comfort zone. Still, the more she thought about it, the more she realized that this might be the very opportunity she had been waiting for. The next few days were filled with brainstorming sessions, planning meetings, and a whirlwind of emails and phone calls. Emily and James were fully on board with the idea of the summit, and they already had a rough outline of the event. Sarah, though still hesitant, found herself drawn to the idea. It felt like the next natural step in her journey, and she knew that if she didn't challenge herself now, she might always wonder what could have been. She spent hours drafting the event agenda, reaching out to potential guest speakers, and coordinating logistics. It was a lot of work, but it was the kind of work that excited her, that made her feel like she was moving towards something even bigger than she had imagined. As the weeks passed and the summit began to take shape, Sarah felt a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in months. The excitement of planning something so expansive, of stepping into a role as a leader and educator, was invigorating. But at the same time, the pressure began to mount. The summit was approaching, and with it, a growing list of responsibilities. The closer the event got, the more Sarah found herself questioning whether she had made the right choice. She would lie awake at night, her mind racing with doubts and uncertainties. Would people actually come? Would the speakers live up to expectations? Was she prepared to handle such a large-scale event? Then, just days before the summit, Sarah received a phone call that made her heart drop into her stomach. It was a client who had signed up for one-on-one sessions but had recently experienced a personal tragedy. She needed to cancel her appointments for the foreseeable future. The cancellation wasn't the problem, it was the realization that life could change in an instant. Her client had lost someone close to her, and now Sarah felt that same weight of uncertainty. She wondered if there was more she could do, more that she should have done, to prepare for these unpredictable twists. Sarah stared at the phone in her hand, her thoughts swirling. It wasn't just the summit that was causing her anxiety. It was the unpredictability of life itself. And she had been so focused on creating something grand, something that would help others, that she had lost sight of the things that mattered most, her ability to show up for the people who needed her in the quiet, personal moments. After taking a deep breath, Sarah decided it was time to take a step back and center herself. She called Rachel and asked if they could meet for coffee. "I've been feeling so anxious lately," Sarah confessed as they sat down at their usual table. "The summit is coming up, and it feels like everything is riding on it. But I don't know if I'm ready for this level of pressure. I'm afraid I might be losing touch with why I started this whole thing in the first place." Rachel listened intently, then smiled softly. "I think you're trying to do too much all at once. I get it, you want to make a big impact, and you're afraid of disappointing people. But remember, you're not doing this alone. You've built a community. And sometimes, the most profound impact doesn't come from doing something huge, it comes from showing up with a genuine heart." Sarah paused, letting Rachel's words sink in. She had been so consumed by the idea of creating something monumental that she had forgotten about the small moments that had made her journey meaningful. The clients who had told her how much her work had impacted their lives. The students who had thanked her for helping them discover their own paths. It wasn't the size of the event that mattered, it was the connection. When Sarah returned to her office that afternoon, she sat quietly for a long time, reflecting on everything Rachel had said. She still believed in the summit, but she realized that her approach had been off. She had been trying to control every detail, to make it perfect. But life wasn't perfect, and neither was she. Sarah decided then and there that she would approach the summit with a renewed sense of authenticity. She would focus on creating a meaningful experience, not just a spectacle. It wasn't about proving something to others. It was about creating an environment where people could learn, grow, and connect. The day of the summit arrived, and Sarah stood backstage, watching the attendees gather. Her heart raced, but as she looked out at the crowd, she felt something shift inside her. The energy in the room was palpable, and it wasn't just because of the speakers or the event itself, it was because of the people. They were here because they were looking for something more, just like she had been when she first began this journey. When Sarah stepped onto the stage, she felt a wave of calm wash over her. She had done the work, and now it was time to trust that the rest would fall into place. By the end of the summit, Sarah knew she had made the right choice. She hadn't tried to be perfect, she had simply shown up. And that was enough. The summit had been a resounding success. The attendees left inspired, the speakers had shared powerful insights, and Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment she hadn't expected. But the victory wasn't just in the outcome, it was in the journey. For the first time, Sarah felt like she had fully embraced the unknown, trusting the process without the need for perfection. She had allowed herself to be vulnerable, to be authentic, and in doing so, she had created something that felt deeply meaningful. However, as the days passed, Sarah found herself experiencing something she hadn't anticipated. The energy that had fueled her for the summit began to wane, replaced by an unfamiliar sense of emptiness. She had worked tirelessly for months, pouring her heart and soul into every detail. Now that it was over, she realized that she didn't know what came next. The phone calls and messages of praise from her attendees were wonderful, but they didn't fill the void she was feeling. It wasn't the recognition she craved, it was the feeling of purpose, the feeling that she was on the right path. She had spent so much time focusing on the summit, she had neglected to take a step back and reflect on what she truly wanted. That evening, Sarah went for a walk, hoping the cool breeze would clear her mind. The city was quieter than usual, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights. She had always found solace in the simple act of walking, alone with her thoughts, no expectations, just the rhythm of her steps. She thought back to her time at the summit. She had helped so many people, but in the process, she had lost sight of her own needs. The success of the summit hadn't provided the fulfillment she had hoped for. The truth was, she wasn't sure what would. As Sarah walked, she recalled a conversation she had had with her mother months ago, shortly before she left her corporate job. Her mother had asked her what her true vision for her future was. At the time, Sarah had been so focused on building her business, on growing her influence, that she hadn't really thought about what she wanted beyond that. What if I don't have it all figured out yet? Sarah thought. The pressure to always know the next step had always been there, and it had weighed on her more than she had realized. But maybe it wasn't about having all the answers. Maybe it was about embracing the uncertainty and letting her intuition guide her, step by step. The next morning, Sarah called Emily and James. She needed to talk. They agreed to meet for lunch, and as they sat down in the cozy cafe near her office, Sarah immediately laid her thoughts out on the table. I feel like I'm at a crossroads, Sarah admitted, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. The summit was incredible, but now I feel lost. Like I've hit a point where I'm not sure what to do next. I thought I'd know by now, but I don't. Emily leaned forward, her eyes full of understanding. It's okay not to have it all figured out, she said gently. What you've built is amazing, Sarah. You've impacted so many lives. But it's normal to feel uncertain after something big like that. You've been working toward this moment for so long, and now that it's over, you're left with the question of, what's next? James nodded. It's okay to take a break. You've poured everything into this, and now it's time to give yourself space to reflect and recharge. Maybe the next step won't come immediately. Maybe it'll come when you least expect it. Sarah took a deep breath, absorbing their words. I think I've been so focused on the next big thing that I've forgotten to be present in the now. To really enjoy the journey, not just the destination. Emily smiled. Exactly. The journey is where the magic happens. Sometimes we get so fixated on the end result that we forget to savor what's right in front of us. Over the next few weeks, Sarah made a conscious effort to slow down. She took time to reconnect with the people and activities that had brought her joy before the pressure of work consumed her. She spent weekends with her family, went on hikes with friends, and even took up a painting class she had always wanted to try. Slowly but surely, she began to rediscover the parts of herself she had lost along the way. One afternoon, while at her favorite park with her sketchpad, Sarah realized that she hadn't thought about her business at all that day. She wasn't worried about her next client or the pressure of planning another event. She was simply present, absorbed in the peaceful rhythm of nature around her. It was in that moment that the realization hit her. She had been so focused on external success that she had forgotten about her internal growth. She wasn't just building a business, she was building herself. And to do that, she needed to balance ambition with self-compassion. She needed to cultivate her own well-being just as much as she cultivated her work. As the weeks continued to pass, Sarah felt a shift within herself. She no longer felt the need to constantly prove something or chase after the next big milestone. Instead, she found herself focusing on quality over quantity. She wasn't interested in growing her business at the expense of her happiness. She wanted to create work that mattered, work that felt meaningful to her, without the pressure of competing with others. One afternoon, as Sarah was sitting at her desk, she opened her calendar and started to schedule her next few months. This time, she didn't just focus on business goals. She scheduled breaks, time for herself, time with loved ones, and time to explore new interests. She didn't want to wait for burnout to force her into rest. She wanted to be proactive about her well-being. That evening, Sarah picked up the phone and called Rachel, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. I think I'm starting to figure it out, Sarah said with a smile in her voice. It's not about having everything mapped out. It's about giving myself the space to grow in the right direction, without rushing it. Rachel's voice was warm on the other end. I'm so glad to hear that. I think you've been carrying a lot, but now you're finally learning to carry it with grace. You're not alone in this, Sarah. You never have been. Sarah smiled, looking out the window at the setting sun. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the need to control every detail. She was ready to trust the process, to embrace the unexpected, and to continue growing, one step at a time. The journey had only just begun. In the weeks following her realization that success wasn't about rushing toward the next big milestone, Sarah found herself in a state of calm she hadn't experienced in years. With a newfound focus on balance, she slowly started to reframe her life, taking the time to prioritize her well-being while continuing her work with clients. She wasn't in a hurry anymore, instead, she was savoring the process, allowing her passions to guide her instead of the pressure to always be ahead. One rainy Tuesday morning, as Sarah sat at her kitchen table sipping her coffee, her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number, and for a moment, she hesitated before answering. Hello. Hi, is this Sarah? A calm voice asked. Yes, speaking, she replied, puzzled. This is Marcus Thompson from Global Ventures. We've been following your work, and we're really impressed with what you've built. I'd love to discuss a potential collaboration opportunity with you. Sarah's mind raced. Global Ventures. The name sounded familiar. They were a well-known consultancy firm that worked with businesses globally, especially in leadership development and innovation. But why were they reaching out to her? Sure, I'd love to hear more, Sarah said, still feeling a mix of surprise and curiosity. Marcus went on to explain that Global Ventures was planning to launch a new initiative focused on integrating personal development into corporate environments. They were looking for someone with expertise in numerology and personal growth to help design a program that would combine individual empowerment with team collaboration. Your background and approach seem like a perfect fit, Marcus said, his tone upbeat. We think there's an incredible opportunity here, and we'd love to collaborate with you on this project. The next few days were filled with a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and research as Sarah explored this unexpected opportunity. It felt surreal at first, but as she delved deeper into the project's scope, she realized how much potential it held. The idea of bringing numerology and personal growth into corporate environments was revolutionary. It aligned perfectly with her passion for helping people discover their own paths and unlock their potential. And the fact that Global Ventures was offering to partner with her felt like a validation of everything she had worked toward. As she sat in her office one evening, Sarah reflected on the enormity of what was unfolding. She had started her journey with a single step, leaving her corporate job to pursue a dream she wasn't sure would work out. Now, months later, she was presented with a chance to collaborate with a global firm, impacting thousands of lives in a way she had never imagined. But even as the excitement grew, a part of her hesitated. This was big. This was potentially a game-changer, not just for her career but for the world of personal development. The pressure was there, and the uncertainty she had once felt about her future began to creep back in. What if she couldn't live up to the expectations? What if this was too big of a leap? The following weekend, Sarah decided to take a break from her usual routine. She needed some clarity, so she headed to the mountains for a weekend retreat. The crisp air, the stillness of the forest, and the quiet moments alone with her thoughts provided the perfect environment to clear her head. While hiking on one of her favorite trails, she couldn't shake the feeling that this opportunity was exactly what she had been waiting for. But she also knew that taking on such a project would require a level of commitment and responsibility that she hadn't fully anticipated. Her mind wandered back to her conversation with Rachel a few weeks ago, when she had admitted feeling uncertain about what came next. Maybe this is the next step, Sarah thought. Maybe this is what I've been building toward. The next morning, as Sarah sat by a peaceful lake, watching the reflection of the trees ripple in the water, the answer came to her with surprising clarity: she was ready. She had already taken the leap once when she left her corporate job to pursue this path, and now, she was ready for the next challenge. But this time, she knew it wouldn't be about the destination. It would be about trusting herself, leaning into her strengths, and allowing the process to unfold. By the time Sarah returned home, she was filled with a sense of purpose. She called Marcus back, her voice steady with determination. "I'm in," Sarah said, her decision clear. "Let's move forward with this project. I believe in the vision, and I'm excited to collaborate." Marcus was thrilled. "That's fantastic, Sarah. We're excited to have you on board. We'll start working on the details right away." The next few months were a blur of meetings, workshops, and research as Sarah and the team at Global Ventures developed the program. They worked tirelessly to combine numerology with business leadership strategies, creating a framework that would not only help individuals grow personally but also improve teamwork and collaboration within organizations. The more Sarah worked on the project, the more she realized just how much she had grown. She was no longer the woman who doubted herself at every turn. She was confident in her knowledge, her skills, and her ability to lead. And as the program began to take shape, she couldn't help but feel proud of how far she had come. One late afternoon, as Sarah was reviewing the final draft of the program, her phone rang again. It was Rachel. "Hey, I just wanted to check in. How's the new project going?" Rachel asked, her voice warm. "It's going really well," Sarah replied, smiling. "It's a huge opportunity, but it feels right. I think this is the next chapter in my journey." "That's amazing," Rachel said. "I knew you'd get there. I've seen how much you've grown, and now the world is starting to take notice." Sarah paused for a moment, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "You've been such a big part of my journey, Rachel. I wouldn't be here without you." Rachel's voice softened. "You've done all the work, Sarah. You've built this from the ground up. I'm just lucky to be along for the ride." As the program launched, Sarah watched with awe as it gained traction. The response from companies was overwhelming, and soon she was working with top-level executives, leading workshops, and helping them discover how personal growth could transform their teams. Her work had gone from a small passion project to an internationally recognized initiative, and Sarah couldn't have been prouder of how it had evolved. But the real reward wasn't in the accolades or the success, it was in the impact she had made. She had always known that her work wasn't just about helping people achieve their goals. It was about helping them discover who they truly were, what they were capable of, and how they could use that to create meaningful change. As Sarah sat in her office one evening, watching the sunset from her window, she realized that the journey was far from over. It was only just beginning. As the months passed, Sarah's life began to feel like a whirlwind of exciting opportunities and challenges. The partnership with Global Ventures had opened doors she had once only dreamed of, and now, as the lead on their personal development initiatives, she was traveling the world, speaking at conferences, and working closely with CEOs and corporate teams to shape their growth strategies. Yet, amid all the success, there was a growing feeling within Sarah. A quiet tugging at her heart that whispered something she hadn't fully acknowledged before. While the external recognition was gratifying, it had become apparent to her that the deeper purpose she sought wasn't found in external validation alone. She had built something incredible, but in doing so, she had unintentionally drifted away from the most important aspect of her life, her connection with herself. One evening, as Sarah was unpacking after a business trip, she came across an old journal tucked in the back of her closet. It was from the early days when she had started her business, a time when everything felt uncertain but full of hope. She flipped through the pages, each filled with raw thoughts, dreams, and reflections on her journey. She read one entry aloud to herself. "I want to build a life that matters. A life that is about more than just success or achievements. It's about living authentically and helping others do the same." Sarah paused, the words striking her with surprising clarity. In the frenzy of building her business and fulfilling other people's expectations, she had lost sight of that deeper vision. She had become so focused on helping others transform that she had neglected her own need for personal growth and self-discovery. That night, after a long day of meetings, Sarah sat in her favorite chair by the window, reflecting on everything she had accomplished. She had always believed that achieving great success was the key to feeling fulfilled, but she was starting to see the truth. True fulfillment came from within, not from external accomplishments or accolades. She made a decision right then: she needed to pause. She needed to reconnect with her own growth, to recalibrate, and find out what her heart truly desired, beyond the next project or the next goal. Sarah realized that her journey wasn't just about outward success. It was about personal transformation, something that required space and time to explore. Over the next few weeks, Sarah consciously stepped back from the fast-paced whirlwind of corporate life. She took a break from traveling and business meetings, allowing herself to spend more time reflecting, reading, and exploring the practices that had initially sparked her passion for personal development. She began journaling again, this time, not about the next big opportunity, but about the things that truly brought her joy and fulfillment. One morning, she awoke early to the sound of birds singing outside her window. The stillness of the morning felt like a gift, an invitation to slow down and listen to her own thoughts. She spent the next hour meditating, something she hadn't done in months. The peace it brought her was indescribable, and in that quiet space, she felt the stirrings of a new idea, one that would bridge the gap between her own personal growth and the work she was doing with others. Later that week, Sarah met with Rachel, eager to share her thoughts. They sat down at a local cafe, where Sarah poured out everything she had been reflecting on. "I've been thinking a lot," Sarah began, her voice calm but filled with excitement. I've helped so many people transform their lives, but I've realized something important. I've been so focused on external success that I've lost touch with what truly makes me feel alive. I want to shift my focus, not just on helping others but on continuing my own growth journey. I want to teach people how to embrace their authentic selves, not just through my work with global ventures, but in a more personal way. I want to bring the same focus and energy to my own inner transformation as I do to helping others. Rachel listened attentively, nodding. I think that's an incredible insight, Sarah. You've done so much for others, but it's clear that your own journey of self-discovery is just as important as everything you're teaching. It's not just about what you give, it's about what you receive in return. The deep understanding of yourself that allows you to help others more effectively. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of her words sink in. Exactly. And I've realized that by nurturing my own growth, I'll be able to create even more impactful work. Not from a place of exhaustion or trying to prove something, but from a place of genuine connection and inner peace. That afternoon, Sarah took a walk in the park to clear her mind. As she walked among the trees, the idea for a new project started to take shape in her thoughts. She envisioned creating a program that combined personal development with the principles of mindfulness, introspection, and self-acceptance. She imagined retreats, workshops, and resources that would allow people to explore their inner selves, to break free from the pressures of society's expectations, and to truly discover what it meant to live authentically. The idea sparked a sense of excitement within her that she hadn't felt in a long time. This wasn't just another business venture, this was a calling. It felt like the missing piece that would bring everything full circle, the work, the personal growth, and the genuine transformation that she had always longed to offer the world. When Sarah returned home that evening, she sat at her desk and began to write down her vision. She started sketching out ideas for the program, from the structure of the workshops to the content that would guide participants through the process of self-discovery. The more she wrote, the more she realized that this was the next step in her journey, one that aligned perfectly with her deepest values. By the end of the week, Sarah had a plan. She would begin working on a new initiative, one that would integrate her passion for numerology and personal growth with the tools of mindfulness and introspection. She would combine her knowledge of personal development with the principles that had helped her find balance in her own life. This project wasn't just about growing her business, it was about growing herself and encouraging others to do the same. As Sarah looked at the outline for her new project, she felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. She was no longer chasing success for the sake of success. She was embracing the journey, wherever it would take her, with trust and openness. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that the path she was walking now was one of deep meaning and transformation. And that, she realized, was the true essence of living authentically, not just in her work, but in every aspect of her life. As Sarah's new project took shape, she felt more aligned with her true self than ever before. The concept of blending numerology, personal growth, and mindfulness was beginning to resonate with her audience in ways she had never anticipated. She had designed a series of workshops that invited individuals to explore not only the practical aspects of personal development but also the deeper layers of who they were beneath the surface. It was something entirely different, and Sarah knew it was the beginning of something transformative, not just for others, but for herself as well. But as the project neared its launch, Sarah found herself facing an unexpected challenge. It came in the form of an email one evening, sent from Marcus Thompson at Global Ventures. Sarah, I've reviewed the latest proposal for the program, and while I appreciate the direction you're taking, I have concerns. Our partners are more focused on data-driven results and tangible ROI. This new direction, focusing on the emotional and spiritual growth of individuals, may be a hard sell to our corporate clients. We need something that will show measurable outcomes. I suggest we go back to the drawing board and tweak the approach to align with our clients' expectations. Sarah stared at the email, the words echoing in her mind. She had anticipated some level of resistance. After all, blending spirituality and corporate culture was a bold move. But reading Marcus's concern stung deeper than she had expected. She had always been proud of her ability to balance intuition and practicality, but now, she was being asked to prioritize one over the other. The pressure to conform to corporate expectations threatened to undo everything she had worked toward. For the next few days, Sarah struggled to find clarity. She met with her team, brainstormed different ways to incorporate more measurable metrics into the program, and even called Rachel to talk it through. But no matter how hard she tried, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was compromising something important, something that she had built her business around. That evening, as Sarah sat on her couch, scrolling through the drafts of her program, a thought struck her: what if this was my final test? In her quietest moments, Sarah had always believed that the path to true success was one of authenticity, alignment, and trust in her inner compass. But now, with the pressure mounting from global ventures and the stakes higher than ever, Sarah found herself at a crossroads. She had worked so hard to integrate her own values into her work, and yet here she was, being asked to compromise for the sake of pleasing her corporate partners. It felt like a betrayal of everything she stood for. She took a deep breath, trying to quiet the noise in her mind. In that moment, Sarah realized something that had always been there but hadn't fully come into focus. Her mission wasn't just to help others transform, it was to lead by example. If she didn't stand firm in her beliefs now, how could she expect others to do the same? The next morning, Sarah called Marcus. Her voice was calm but resolute. "Marcus," she began, "I've thought a lot about your feedback. I understand the need for measurable results, and I agree that it's important to demonstrate the effectiveness of the program. But I also believe that personal growth isn't something that can always be measured by traditional corporate metrics. It's about transformation, about people unlocking their full potential, not just hitting targets or achieving quotas. This program is designed to create meaningful, lasting change, and I'm not willing to dilute that for the sake of pleasing the corporate bottom line." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Sarah could almost hear Marcus processing her words. Finally, he spoke. "I understand where you're coming from, Sarah," he said slowly. "But this isn't just about us, it's about your vision for the future of corporate development. And I think you need to decide what that vision really is. If you choose this path, it could alienate some of our partners, but it could also set you apart in ways that nothing else will. It's a risk, but it's also an opportunity." Sarah's heart raced as she processed his words. This was it, the moment where she would either stand her ground or retreat. She had spent so many years building up to this point, and now, she realized that this decision wasn't just about the program or her partnership with Global Ventures. It was about her own identity. Was she willing to take a risk on herself? On her vision? Was she willing to walk away from the safety of the known in order to follow the pull of her inner truth? After the call, Sarah sat in silence, letting the weight of her decision settle in. She knew what she had to do. Her vision had always been about empowering individuals, not through quick fixes or surface-level solutions, but through deep, authentic growth. And if she wasn't willing to trust in that vision now, she would never be able to fully embrace the journey that had brought her here. That afternoon, Sarah sent an email to Marcus. Her words were clear and decisive. "Thank you for your feedback, Marcus. After careful consideration, I've decided to move forward with the program as I originally envisioned it. I believe this approach is the future of leadership development. It's not just about numbers and results, it's about empowering individuals to unlock their true potential, both professionally and personally. If this is not something that aligns with Global Ventures' current priorities, I understand, but I must stay true to my vision." As she hit send, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. She had taken a risk, yes, but it was a risk she felt confident in. She was no longer afraid of the unknown or the possibility of failure. She had built her business on trust, authenticity, and a deep belief in the power of transformation. And now, she was ready to see where that path would take her. Weeks later, Sarah's decision was met with mixed reactions. Some of Global Ventures' partners were hesitant about the direction, while others saw the boldness of her vision and embraced it. The program launched to glowing reviews, and soon, companies were clamoring to participate in Sarah's transformative workshops. Sarah knew the journey wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always be moments of doubt. But in that final test, she had learned the most valuable lesson of all: true transformation came from staying aligned with her authentic self, no matter the external pressures. And that, she knew, was the only way to create real, lasting change. For Sarah, the answer was clear: the unwavering belief in her own truth. And that belief would guide her as she moved forward, ready to face whatever came next with the same courage and conviction that had brought her this far. Months had passed since Sarah's decision to follow her intuition, and now, as she stood at the podium in front of a packed room of eager professionals, she couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how far she had come. Her program, which had once felt like a distant dream, was now a thriving reality, shaping the future of leadership development in ways she had never imagined. But it wasn't just the success of the program that filled her with gratitude, it was the transformation she had experienced along the way. Sarah's journey had come full circle. What had started as a bold vision to combine personal growth with professional development had turned into something much bigger. It had become a mission, a way of life. And now, standing at the crossroads of where she had once been and where she was headed, Sarah realized that this was not the end, but the beginning of a new chapter, one that would continue to evolve as she did. As she spoke to the audience about the intersection of personal transformation and professional success, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on her own journey. The struggle, the doubts, the moments of fear, everything had led her to this point. She had built her business from the ground up, and more importantly, she had learned how to trust herself in ways she hadn't believed possible when she first started out. The program she had created was a direct reflection of her own growth. It wasn't just about offering a solution to corporate clients, it was about offering a path to self-discovery. Through numerology, mindfulness, and leadership principles, Sarah had crafted a program that helped people uncover their authentic selves, break free from limiting beliefs, and unlock their true potential. The feedback had been overwhelming. Executives who had once struggled with stress, burnout, and a sense of disconnection were now leading their teams with more confidence and clarity. Employees who had felt lost in their careers were rediscovering their passions and finding purpose in their work. It wasn't just about business, it was about creating a ripple effect of change that went far beyond the corporate world. After the keynote, Sarah returned to her hotel room, her mind racing with excitement. As she sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, she thought about the path that had brought her here. It had been anything but easy. There had been moments when she had questioned her decisions, wondered if she was doing the right thing, and doubted whether she was truly capable of creating the impact she had dreamed of. But now, with the program flourishing and the lives she had touched, Sarah understood something that had taken her years to realize: the true measure of success was not in what she had achieved, but in how she had grown along the way. She had learned to embrace uncertainty, to trust the process, and to never stop evolving. She had also learned that the journey was not meant to be a straight line. It was filled with detours, obstacles, and moments of vulnerability. But it was those very moments that had shaped her into the leader she was today. As Sarah reflected on her journey, she received a call from Rachel. Her voice was filled with enthusiasm. "Sarah, you won't believe it. We've just signed our largest corporate client yet. This is a huge win for the program, and they're already asking for more workshops. They're seeing the value in what you've built." Sarah smiled as she listened to Rachel's excitement. She had come so far, but there was still so much more to do. The world was changing, and she knew that her mission was far from over. "I'm so grateful, Rachel," Sarah replied. "This is just the beginning. There's so much potential for this program to expand. But more than that, I'm grateful for the people who've been a part of this journey, from you to the incredible individuals who have trusted me with their own growth. We're building something meaningful, something that will leave a lasting impact." That night, as Sarah sat down to write in her journal, she reflected on a question that had often lingered in her mind. What does true success look like? For so long, Sarah had believed that success was about reaching a destination, a place where she could look back and say, "I've made it." But now, after everything she had been through, she understood that success wasn't a destination at all. It was a continuous journey, a journey of growth, transformation, and service to others. It was about staying true to one's authentic self and using that truth to inspire and uplift those around you. In that moment, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. She had made the decision to follow her heart, to trust her instincts, and to create something that aligned with her deepest values. She had taken risks, faced setbacks, and weathered storms. But in the end, it had been worth it. The next morning, Sarah stood on the balcony of her hotel room, watching the sun rise over the city. She took a deep breath, savoring the quiet stillness before the day began. She had learned so much on this journey, but the most important lesson was this: the power of transformation lies not in what we achieve, but in who we become along the way. As she prepared to head home, Sarah felt a deep sense of gratitude for the people who had supported her throughout this process, for the lessons she had learned, and for the work that still lay ahead. She had discovered a new sense of purpose, not just in her career, but in her life as a whole. She was no longer just a leader in the business world, she was a leader in her own life, committed to her growth and the growth of others. And as Sarah closed her journal, she smiled, knowing that the journey was far from over. There was still so much more to discover, so much more to learn, and so much more to give. The road ahead was filled with endless possibilities, and she was ready to embrace whatever came next, knowing that she was walking in alignment with her true self. For Sarah, the answer was simple: the belief that transformation is possible, for herself and for the world around her. And as long as she held on to that belief, she knew the journey would continue, taking her to places she had only dreamed of. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?